Hey everyone, before we get into this episode, I want to let you know about my free guidebook called Music Production Essentials. It's a brief rundown of my top 24 takeaways that I've learned over the course of interviewing so many audio professionals for this podcast. So just go to secretsonics.co and you'll see the image. It's a totally free download and I hope it helps you with your productions. Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 102 with Ann Lay. I had a great chat with Ann. She is a producer / artist who self-produces her own work. So we talked about her journey from being a songwriter who didn't quite know how to explain to the producers working with her how to get her song across to actually just doing it all herself. And we talk about her journey, learning how to self-produce, how she produces and writes songs. Now she's also producing for other people. And we talked about how she managed to get herself placed on some serious Spotify playlists and how she's been able to get the algorithm to work in her favor. And so she's got tons of advice for up-and-coming artists and how to produce yourself. So I think you're going to love this conversation. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Ann Lay here on Secret Sonics. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Ann Lay, a.k.a. êMIA. Ann Lay is a Vietnamese-American singer, songwriter, and producer who is handcrafting her own tell-all brand of pop music. Heavily inspired by artists like Taylor Swift and Avril Lavigne, Lay follows in her idol's footsteps through singles like Teleprompter and Needy, Desperate Manic, and many more. As an independent artist, she has gone through many different stages of her career, from cultivating a following through YouTube covers as a teenager to providing vocals for a number of up-and-coming SoundCloud producers as a 20-something-year-old. She is no stranger to garnering a worldwide audience for a homemade product. Through her self-released debut EP, Little Secret, she has been featured on a myriad of Spotify and Apple Music editorial playlists, New Music Friday, Spain and Belgium, Fresh Finds, and Dope AF, to name a few. Taking her influences from electronic music, R&B, film scores, and musical theater, her sonic universe sounds like your favorite young adult novel and is as binge-worthy as a late-night soap opera. Powered by seltzer water, sour gummies, and overly detailed journal entries, she is making a full-length album right now. Former guest of the show, Austin Hall, recommended I reach out to Ann, who's graciously agreed to join me on the show. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Ann.
Woo! Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. As a Jew from Brooklyn talking to another person in Brooklyn, I have to say that we just call it seltzer. No need for adding water.
Oh, you're so right. That's going to get cut out of the bio for sure.
No stress. No, that's other people call it soda, so.
That's true.
It's so like geographically based. In any event, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that you're kind of an interesting person because you self-produce your own music, which is really awesome. So I'm kind of interested to hear your story. How did music start for you, and kind of how did you begin that journey into, hey, I'm producing my own songs?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. It's because it's been long. To me, it feels long, and I still feel like I'm right at the beginning of it with self-producing my own music. But I started getting into music through piano. I took lessons as a kid, and my parents were very much all about that. And what really sold me, though, I was definitely terrible at practicing and all of that, but I had an amazing teacher, and my parents let me join every choir imaginable in elementary school, and that was like gateway drug to music. And I think the idea of being a songwriter or a producer was not something that that seemed possible or was even a thing to think about until I was in like high school. I remember just kind of stumbling across some kid in my high school who I think on Facebook announced that he was going to this thing called Grammy Camp, which was like a music industry music camp at USC. And it was so fancy, and I'm not sure, he probably had like a selfie with like somebody famous. And I was like, what is this? Like, who does this guy think he is? And he was like, oh, I'm a producer and I went to this camp and now I'm so legit. And I was like very, very jealous and applied myself. And when I got to that camp was like the first time I ever had a glimpse of what becoming a musician looked like beyond just like going on American Idol or singing YouTube covers. And I think I wasn't in the music producer track, but I was in the songwriter like little group, and was just like entry to, oh, there are people who like open up a computer and record sounds, like the things, like the drums and the synths and all of that. Like there are people that do that. That is their hobby or that is their thing. And I was just so fascinated with it, but it didn't feel like something I could do. And because of like going to that camp, I was convinced that I had to go to music school. And I went to college for music composition, contemporary music composition, which is more or less at the time like film scoring. And but while I was in school, film scoring was just not for me personally, and I was still kind of obsessed with the idea of like making pop music specifically. And honestly, I think producing my own music was like a result of just a lot of failures in like a lot of areas. I wasn't down with like film scoring or classical composition or just pure songwriting. I always felt like I just wasn't the best at any of those things. And I also really struggled. I felt like whenever I was performing my songs, they just kind of existed in just a piano vocal world because that's the only way I knew how to perform it. And every time I gave the song for someone else to produce, it just there was always something that was missing. And eventually that me trying to make bad demos to give to other producers so that they can make it good, like became like the start of me really trying to increase like my like skill levels so that I could do it 100%. But yeah, that long ramble was the journey.
I love that. I mean, I've worked with some artists myself who I kind of like realize like, no, you actually have a very clear vision that you have for this song that unless you pay me hourly, there's no way I can produce you. So it's like, you got to do this yourself, like, you know, and it's so great that you were able to kind of put yourself into that. And like, you know, the first one you do is always bad, but eventually it gets good. Why didn't you think you could do that? Like you mentioned that you said, that's not something I could ever do. What was holding you back, and why didn't you think you could do it?
A couple things. I think definitely like the pretty common story of just like, oh, I just have never seen like someone else that I felt represented like me. Like, oh, like there wasn't at the time, a lot of female producers, much less like Asian American female producers that I could be like, oh my God, like I'm going to be just like her. So I just couldn't really imagine myself like in the studio, like behind a board. That just was not like in my dreams and fantasies. And the other thing was I felt like in my younger age was very much, every time I had like someone say like, oh, like that's so good. Like you really, really know how to like write piano vocal ballads so well. Like in school, I remember my professors like really liked that I did that. And I would just kind of absorb that praise and adopted that as like my identity because, oh, like this was like the kind of the easiest route. Like it seems like everyone says and everyone thinks that this is the thing that I'm the best at. Therefore, why should I even bother branching out? It seems like everyone thinks that I would be wasting my time, like learning another skill that I would never be the best at. Whereas I'm already good at this one thing. Why can't I just stick to this thing? So I think like I was trying too hard to, I guess, be practical and like get my validation through doing the same thing. And in addition to that, like not really having that many role models to challenge that.
Yeah. Wow. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm glad you pushed through that. It's I think about this a lot. It's like, for me, like playing bass actually came easier than producing. Like it's like it was more natural fit to be like a bass player in a band, you know, like that's my, and so I had to actually put a lot of intentional effort to like get good in the studio.
Yeah.
And it's actually easier for me to teach people how to produce than it is for me to teach people how to play bass, because bass is very like intuitive and instinctive for me, whereas like this is very very brainy, and I've like taken the time to learn it. Like obviously I know music theory and stuff, but it's interesting. It's like, what is the obvious thing and what is the thing that you have to work hard for? I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. Did you learn bass? How old were you when you first picked up bass?
Like 14.
Okay, yeah.
Oh man, I'm going on like 2 decades now.
I was just about to say, I also teach piano, and I find teaching piano really hard because I think like everything that's obvious, like there's a letter to a key and you press it. And it's just all these things like you have to tie when someone is like, there's no like, maybe they're even like learning the alphabet as they're learning piano, like connecting every single dot. And at this point, I feel you on like, well, it's just obvious. Just you do this.
Muscle memory.
Muscle memory. Like, how is this not common sense? But production is like, you really do have to earn the right. You have to go through all of this and you will remember it. Like, it's like the trauma of like learning how to painstakingly make something sound good just really sticks with you. And I could see how teaching production would be easier.
Maybe we just forget the trauma of learning the instrument when we were younger or something. I don't know.
You know what? You're probably right about that.
I don't know. Yeah, wait, so tell me, like, when did you realize, like, songwriting and producing songwriting is going to be my jam for the long haul? Like, did you have like a moment where like, oh, this is happening?
Yeah, actually, I think the moment started coincidentally because you said Austin connected me to you. I remember when I was making those bad demos to send to other producers, I was watching Austin's tutorials like in my parents' basement being like, okay, well, I can't make it still has to be somewhat good enough so that they know what's going on. And I think doing that and kind of hearing my own progress felt like extremely validating and something that I really could control. Like I felt personally every time I learned how to, I don't know, process vocals in a cool way that I loved. Like if anyone else was like, I don't like that, I would still love it. And I was like, this is like a source of joy and happiness, even if it's not going to be like my thing. Like I'll never be a producer. I love this so much. Like this has to be a part of how I write at least. And so I think that was like a personal thing for me to realize. And then I think the second thing was, as I got better and as I started even releasing like my own fully self-produced songs, I realized that I think the vision that I wanted for the songs did come out way better than having someone else like try to interpret what I wanted from it. And even though whenever I listen to those old songs again, I'm like, it doesn't sound that great. Like I am still like, oh, there's something very distinctly me. And for whatever reason at the time, like I think people responded to it, and those songs in particular, like my most streamed song on Spotify, I think is like my self-produced song, even though like underneath it is still like a lot of features and all this and collabs. I think knowing how rewarding that feels, I'm like, I feel like I need to do more of that because that is like 100% my world. And I do think there's something, I'm not even sure, like I'm still figuring out what production things sound like me. But I'm like, I have this like, I don't know, this feeling that the more I figure it out, like the more special the song is. And that was like rewarding enough for me to feel like it has to be something I need to follow through with.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Well, something that I feel with people that do their own productions is you really have to have like a vision for what you want out of your music. So how do your songs usually start? Like, what does it begin with on the piano, in the DAW? Like, where does inspiration strike? Like, how does it begin?
So many places. Because I spent so much time in college top lining and doing vocal melody